So hello everyone, welcome to the third MyData webinar, which is focusing today on the ideas and implementations of personal data wallets and vaults. My name is Vivi Lähteenoja, and I serve as the Deputy General Manager for MyData Global, and I will moderate today's webinar. So regardless of whether you're a newbie or a longtime friend of MyData, these webinars provide a great chance for you and for us to dive into the various important topics relevant to MyData, as well as to learn more about ongoing initiatives, projects, and developments in the field. So before introducing the two exciting presentations that we have lined up for you today, I'd like to start with a few words about MyData in general. MyData is an idea and an alternative vision for the use of personal data. It's also a movement and a community, and it's a global organization. So the core idea of MyData is that people, you and I, we should have an easy way to see where data about us goes, specify who can use it, and alter these decisions over time. And we believe that to see this become reality in the world, we need to really push for three major shifts. These are the shift from formal to actionable rights, the shift from data protection to data empowerment, and the shift from closed to open ecosystems. These shifts are further explained in the MyData Declaration, and you should read it. It's not very long, and it's very readable. It's on our website at mydata.org/declaration. So the MyData movement and community are facilitated by MyData Global, whose main purpose is to empower individuals by improving their right to self-determination regarding their personal data. And we're doing this together with the different stakeholders from business, legal, tech, and societal sectors that make up the MyData community. Right. So like I said, the webinars are also the space and time where to introduce work related to human-centric personal data. So today we have for you Marie-José from Schluss speaking with the following title. With Schluss, you and only you decide who knows what about you. How do we ensure that at all times? And after her, we also have Robert, who will be speaking with the following title. Minerva, user-friendly interface towards decentralized data economy, using personal digital assistant to access my data vaults, how to keep my data safe and accessible. So the flow of the webinar will go as follows. Both Marie-José and Robert take approximately 15 to 20 minutes for their presentations. We can then take a few questions after each presentation and wrap up then with a short discussion in the end, more generally about today's topic. So just before I go ahead and give the word to our presenters, I want to let you know also that this webinar is being recorded, so we can share this with others who are unavailable to attend today. Right, so now I will pass the ball to Marie-José. Please tell us who you are and tell us about Schluss.
Thank you so much, Vivi, for offering us the opportunity to tell you and the rest of the world something more about Schluss. I will start my slide share, which so that's better, I think, I hope, and we can see my presentation. First, I'd like to start with telling you something that you probably all know, that our information is shattered all over the internet at hundreds of thousands of places where we don't know where that information exactly is. And we don't know what our user information is used for, but we know for sure at the same time that it can't be up to date everywhere. And on the contrary, there are some organizations here who know everything about us. And knowledge is power. And I think that it's scary that that power is in the hands of some commercial organizations. And that is where our big dream comes from. We dream of a world in which each, let me see, we dream of a world in which each individual is back in control of his own information again. And we know how to do it. We thought, why don't we turn the data stream around and storing your information not at all those hundreds of places, but in one, between brackets, central place, which only you can access. In that multiple encrypted digital vault, you can store anything ranging from real simple addresses, photos, test results, diplomas, your Internet of Things items, medical information, financial information, everything. Only you have the key of that vault, so you can decide whom you grant access to what part of your information and for what reason you grant that access and even for what period. I know you could think that for organizations, governments, this way of doing business is not so interesting, but also for them, there's a lot to achieve. Because if you can imagine in the future, I will tell you something more about our timeline as well. In the future, they will store the information they have of you in your vault. And at the same time, you grant access to all those services, etc., that require your information upon your approval. And you see with this in mind that these companies, organizations, governments have access to real-time, up-to-date information from their customers, their clients, their citizens, without having to store it. And storing information is more and more a risk as well, with data breaches, etc., coming up. At the same time, if you have that information in your vault, all that information in your vault, then those companies that you think offer good services or apply valid research on your data, those are the companies and organizations that you allow access to your information. So, but what is important at the same time is that you will keep overview on what information has been disclosed to what parties, and for what reason, for what period even. Because only when you have that overview, then you will have the real control over it. I promise you a little bit about our timeline, because we know that our mission is huge, that it will take time to achieve the turning around of the data stream. So what we see at the moment, that you can see due to GDPR legislation, what information a company or organization has of you. That's nice, of course, but still you have to visit all those organizations, their My page, to see what information they have. At the same time, we see Horizon 1 already existing. In this stage, you can retrieve in, for instance, certified PDF form, the information from that organization, from your government or commercial company, and retrieve it to your own premises, and preferably directly in your vault, from where you can others allow access to it. That's nice, of course, but the disadvantage is that it's still a moment, it's not real-time up-to-date. And another disadvantage is that the information, the source of the information, is still at the premise of the issuing party. In Horizon 2, we see that part of that disadvantages is already solved, because in that stage, you're able to disclose the information still at a sourcing, at an issuing company or organization or government, but you're able to disclose it directly to another company or organization which will apply services to it. This is what we call linked data, and this is where Tim Berners-Lee with his solids is working on. We need to pass through this Horizon 2 to achieve Horizon 3, because in this stage, all problems around ontology are hopefully solved. But the disadvantage about not gaining access to real-time up-to-date information is solved. But at the same time, the information is not under your control, since it's still at the issuing party. And that's the step that we will take in Horizon 3. Then, in that stage, the issuing parties will write the information they produce of you directly in a sort of database of personal vaults in your own digital Schluss vault. These are the stages that we will work along to achieve that final goal. It will take time, years, we think. And in those years, we have to learn, we have to test, we have to validate, we have to build on 4 pillars that are important to achieve that big goal. And techniques, of course, is of major importance to achieve this. But on techniques, people are working really hard. And I'll tell you something more about the techniques and how we foresee that and use that. But techniques itself will not be enough. Making this available for people, the UX and UI are of least the same most importance to achieve. If you're not able to easily use an app like Schluss in the future, if you're not able to use it easily and convenient, efficient, then we will not succeed. So we have to test and validate that as well, because for people, this is a complete new system. And with all the testing, etc., that we have done so far, we know that we have a lot to teach to people about how they can make the most out of this new system. Third important pillar to achieve the goal is the communication with the people that we are making this available for. Because if I ask people nowadays, do you want to have the control of your information? Then 99% of the people says, yes, I desperately want that. But at the same time, they're not acting on that as well. So what do we need to communicate with them to achieve that they will start using systems like Schluss? And of course, 4th pillar important for success is legal compliance. Then we have to learn and lobby maybe a lot of things as well. I promised you also to tell you something about the techniques shortly, because Maurice is in the webinar as well to answer deep technical questions. But I will take you into what we are trying to achieve. We foresee that, what we want is that 3 important layers are separate. We foresee 1 layer for identification and authentication, 1 separate layer for the authorization, and 1 for the storage. In the identification authentication layer, techniques are made available for ensuring that you are you and that your information is accurate and stamped. In authorization, that's the layer where you're able to manage to whom are you disclosing your information, for what reason and for what period. This is a layer where blockchain might play a role. And the 3rd layer, the storage layer, is of course the layer where all your information is kept safe. And for this reason, of course, we're working not with a centralized database, but with distributed storage. At the moment, we are working on IPFS. You see that in all these layers, big parties are developing their techniques. And that's great, because what we are doing is taking the best out of all these techniques and present a layer over it. So this way, we ensure that there's no vendor lock-in possible. There's not one way that you're able to identify yourself. To ensure that that you're not tied to one system or one authorization system or whatever. So this is the way it's basically looks. The identity layer, authorization layer, and storage layer are separated. We are knotting all these techniques together and presenting a dashboard over it. So this way, people are able to make choices themselves. With Schluss, we're working with a core team of about 8 or 9 people, very hard to make this happen. And at the same time, we also have a board of advice, very helpful and very useful for us. And around us, we have a cooperative team of about 70 or 80 people working closely with us and sharing knowledge and network with us. To make a system like this happen, we are developing around our timeline. And we are developing that big Schluss system in proof of concepts. We are building these proof of concepts together with pilot partners in this stage. We are building around use cases. And in such a use case, we are building part of the techniques and also parts of the usability. We are proud on the partners that we are working on in this stage, and I will tell you something more about the proof of concepts that we are currently doing. We have run through some programs and received some nominations and some awards as well. So we are happy and proud on that, of course. Because to make this happen, we know we can, but we have to do it together. Only together we can change the internet. And that's why, of course, our software is open source, so that everybody can take a look and see that vault that we have built for you, that you can open it completely client-side, so that Schluss doesn't know that a new vault has been opened, or let's say that you have opened it, or even what you stored in it. Schluss also knows nothing about you. And to ensure that a system like this is, for now, but also for the far future, always formed from the people, that it will always remain that independent, trusted third party, we are building towards a cooperative, where each Schluss user will be co-owner of the company. And you remember when I started and told you about those big companies knowing everything about you? We have to avoid building such a similar system. And to ensure that, we think we need the cooperative form and not a commercial organization where shareholder value or profit maximizations are the drivers for success. Let me show you very shortly about some proof of concepts that we're doing. This is a proof of concept that we are currently doing with a big bank in the Netherlands around the mortgage offer, where you can down and upload information that's required for the offer, for the insurance, that you can have a certain amount for your required for the mortgage. You download you get a request for information from the bank. You can see that request in your Schluss app. You can directly download and upload in your Schluss vault the required information, and then make it available for the bank, where they can apply AI to ensure immediately that you can get that offer or not, which makes it also available for small business owners, etc., to get a mortgage for a new house. And that's great. And at the same time, and that's for us, of course, really important, they ensure, or they know that the information that they do disclose to the bank, that they are keeping control over it themselves. Another proof of concept that we are doing is appointing a representative in case you're not able to take the control yourself for a period of time, or in the worst event, at the time that you die, and that other people do need access to part of your digital information to take action on your heritage. So because we know that in the end we can achieve what we promise. With Schluss, you, and only you decide who knows what about you. Thank you so much. Do you have questions, somebody?
Thanks so much, Marie-José. Yes, please. There's a source code repository link in the chat from Maurice. And I know I have questions for Marie-José and about Schluss, but I want to give everyone else in the webinar a chance to go first, because otherwise that would be unfair. So please, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Hi, Robert here. I would have a question actually about this cooperative and how you imagine that this, how this will work as an organization or as a distributed structure. How do you envision that you can roll it out?
Yeah, the advantage of a cooperative above all other organizational forms is that all the people are co-owning the company, the organization. So that's the main driver for us to choose for the cooperative form. And we know that guiding a cooperative also takes time because you need to have elections, who is in the board and who is in charge of running the cooperative. But we do have the thoughts on how to do that properly as well. Of course, it has to be democratic, but at the same time, we believe that democracy as it is in this stage is difficult. And there are some interesting thoughts of a Belgian guy, Van Rijbroek is his name, who thinks about if hard decisions have to be taken by the cooperative, people are appointed, a group of people are appointed to take that decision, and they get all the chances and all the knowledge, etc., they need to take proper decision. But that's are the thoughts that we have right now on building the cooperative. And at the same time, we do have some trouble with opening a cooperative because you remember our tagline with Schluss, you and only you decide who knows what about you. So in techniques, we are building it that we don't know that a new vault has been opened. Let's say that we even, for sure, then we don't know that it was you or somebody else. But for opening or starting a cooperative, you need to have a membership list. And that's not what we want to achieve, what we would prefer to have. But yeah, so we have are discussing and investigating on how we can do that properly as well. Does that answer your question a little bit, Robert?
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Robert, for the question. I have a follow-up on that, actually. So cooperatives are obviously one kind of legal form that you could consider, and there are others. For example, there seems to be a lot of movement around data trusts, where you have a set of appointed trustees who make decisions based on the kind of the collective will.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
so how do you feel about those?
Yeah, you see the data trust, the data commons, the data cooperatives, where, and that's an interesting thing, I think, and those are, for me, those are sort of marketplaces that will arise where question and answers or will be brought together. There will be a need to get information, maybe for research, health research, and where are you with all that data able to find those parties that offer relevant services, or where you can combine with other people your data to make it valuable for research, for instance. So there will be data marketplaces where the trade will be between all those different parties. And for Schluss, we think it's very important that with Schluss, you can only store your information and keep control over to whom you grant access. And all the services and all the aggregation or enrichment or etc., that should be done by other parties, service parties. And there is where the money can be made. And so with my information, I would like to choose myself for what assistant I will choose to get the best out of all my data, or I would like to choose what's the best app for whatever reason. So all the services has to be clearly kept apart from a more basic system like Schluss will be.
Okay, thank you.
Is that clear?
Yeah, no, I would love to talk more about the kind of the MyData declarations second part, which sort of describes the MyData operator, data using service, data source. But I think that we can come back to that at the end of the webinar. So I'll ask one more time if there's someone else who has a question in the call or in the webinar before we move over to Robert. So you will have a chance to talk to Marie-José still at the end of the webinar, but if you have something specific about Schluss right now, please unmute yourself and do ask. Okay, I don't see anyone else apart from Robert unmuting, so I will hand over to Robert. You have the floor. Please tell us about Minerva.
Good. So hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's a very nice opportunity to basically talk about a different overlapping within the space of the technology which we are building here. My name is Robert Mitwicki. I'm representing Lab 10 Collective. I'm a lead link within that cooperative organization, which is based in Graz. We are focusing there on the blockchain and identity technologies, and I'm personally responsible for the digital wallet. So we'll get to that, what actually it means to have a digital wallet. But in addition of that, I'm one of the co-sponsors of Hyperledger Aries. Hyperledger Aries is a project within Hyperledger umbrella ecosystem, which focusing on the peer-to-peer blockchain-based identity interaction. In addition of that, I'm as well a member of the TIVA Innovation Hub, where we are working on a concept of the overlay data capture architecture. So to facilitate unified data language, which we'll see later on in the presentation, how that combine together all the pieces together. So today I would like to briefly go through definition of the digital wallet and what actually it means to have one, and what actually the definition of the digital wallet which we are using is. So Minerva is a name of the digital wallet which we are building within Lab 10 Collective. Another way of calling it, and actually that's my preferred way of calling it, it's a personal digital assistant, so PDA. And you will quite often see that phrase across different slides. And the reason for that is because there is a huge variation of the definition of the digital wallet or the wallet itself, and there is a different ones in the different communities, and obviously this is always a tricky to talk about something which doesn't have exactly the same definition, so we need to watch out on that. So starting with that, what the digital wallet or what the personal digital assistant is not only for is that you probably are familiar with the different concepts of the wallets coming from the cryptocurrency space, blockchain, that you have a crypto wallet, that you have a key storage or key manager that basically keeps on some private keys, public private keys related with the wallet, related with some identity. That's not only that, there is much more coming into place as soon as we start talking about PDA. And obviously this is not like a specific one application or specific software which you just run. It's much more complex system which is composed of multiple different entities, and we'll see that in a couple of slides. So what actually is it the personal digital assistant? And one of the best phrases which we coined within Lab 10, which I think purely describe what we are trying to achieve, is basically a user-friendly interface towards decentralized data economy. So to have analogy, the digital wallet or the personal digital assistant for decentralized data economy is the same thing as the internet browser for the modern internet. So it's a window, it's a gateway, how you get access to all those goody stuff up there. And obviously it's a home for self-sovereign identity, it's a home for personal data storage, data vaults, which we'll focus on today. There is obviously access to your all valuable things, purpose services, meaningful services, and different interactions, which is built on top of decentralized data economy. And obviously the simple questions like why we need it, why we cannot use just a browser, or why we cannot use some other concept. And obviously, I mean, there is a lot of problems which most of people here probably are aware of, and this is what the MyData Global is fighting for, with the principles behind it. As there is a lot of issues with the current privacy, there is a lot of issues with data silos. There is a problem with having your identity online and having this digital identity appearing in different places, because identity is not just a simple set of the credentials. It's just a vast amount of signals and artifacts, which basically makes you really you. It's not a password and email. It's much more into that. And due to this complexity, you need to have a solution which basically will hide this complexity behind the regular users, so they can understand how it works and be able to use it. And this is where this is what was mentioned in the previous presentation, that the UX and UI is very important, because those are the complex problems which we need to solve so that people can understand it and be familiar with. And obviously a lot of stuff in the context of mobility, in the sense that it doesn't matter where you go, what kind of system you are using, or what kind of data you're carrying with you. It should be possible to easily interact, across cities, across countries, across continents. It doesn't matter where you are. The data goes together with you, and they are not tied to any governmental organization or a specific company. And obviously decentralization point. So this is already what was mentioned already, the data silos, avoiding honeypots and stuff like that. So this is super important to figuring out how we can achieve that, because obviously we are putting on stake, someone live, or all the data which he aggregated, and basically the data is becoming this new oil, and it's a fuel for this decentralized data economy. So it's important to have it safe and avoid any potential risks. And the last but not least, convenience. So basically, as I mentioned, hidden the black magic behind all these complex systems, because obviously not everyone is able to grasp how it works and why, and what is the cryptography behind it, or stuff like that. So it needs to be super convenient, and the user experience should be smooth. So since we are talking about how we are planning to use it, we need to look on that, what we are planning to have within this digital wallet. And obviously there is a lot of complex stuff going into it, and I have here a list of the stuff which are, let's say, the most important ones, but that's not the final list. There is much more into it, but just a few examples of just to give you an idea how complex a PDA is and what stuff are in. So obviously identification and a sorts of existing ones and new ones, like DID-AUF and some other, which maybe in the future will pops up. There is a verifiable credential aspect, so everything related with transporting trust. There is a valuable, so anything related with transferring the value, existing systems and new systems as well, like cryptocurrency. Identities in a sense of the view of your identities, which you're using against anybody else, and everything related with that identity around it, like address book, identity timelines, microledger, multiple personas. So you have one personal one for work, and one for, let's say, a hobby. You don't necessarily need to reuse those identity across different scenarios. So you want to separate the data and your identities in your digital life. There are some mechanisms for emergency access, guardianship, delegation. This is what in the previous presentation Marie mentioned about, what is happening if you die, who will have access to your data, and how this will be, how the guardianship will be established after that will happen, right? Obviously, there is important part, the consent management. So everything what is related with your data, and who and how and when has access to your data, how it's stored, how it's monitored, how how the PIIs or personal identifiable information are treated, and basically the whole life cycle of the data. Then ODCA, this is something which we'll mention later on. It's a unified data language, or actually architecture which facilitate unified data language. Then obviously systems like backup, restore in case if you lose it, if you lost it, if someone will steal it, stuff which basically make the people life easier in case if this kind of emergency situation. Multiple device support. Obviously, most convenient one is running it on mobile, but there is laptop, there is a PC desktop, there is a cloud, there is a different devices which we are using nowadays, which they need to talk each other, and they need to have access to all those all the aspects of your identity and the data. And this is following by the pluggable content, means that you don't need to carry all your data together with you all the time, because obviously you don't have to have them in one place all the time. Imagine you go on the holidays, you don't need to have your university diploma with you, but obviously driving license, some credit cards, and maybe some additional documents that are required. So you basically take them, put them into your mobile wallet, and basically carry with you, and everything else stay safe in your safe at home. Signing, receipts, ownership, warranties, all the stuff which basically we are doing daily basis. Like if you go to the store, you're buying something, immediately the receipt is transferred to your digital wallet, to the data vault, so you can keep that everything in one place. Monitoring, auditing, this is important aspect for the transparency and basically putting a little bit trust in the whole ecosystem, that anytime you can take a look who's using your data, where they are transferred, who has access to it, what happened with it, who created or removed the data, and stuff like that. So everything can be tracked down, and you can be in control of your data. In a sense, you can say that PDA tells me who is using my email address, and boo, you have a list of the companies who actually right now are using or having access to your email address. Different types of the notification, trusted hub registry, so knowing who you can trust and who not. And obviously this is the point which we will focus a little bit today, the PDS, the personal data storage, like a data vault, how the PIIs are handled there, how it works, cloud versus local, how actually I can talk data. So I already mentioned about this. This is important to understand. It's not one piece of the software. It can run in a very decentralized fashion. It can be on your mobile device, desktop, cloud, hardware storage, specific dedicated device like a card with a chip on it. And obviously, which is quite as well interesting part, your network. But this is like a topic for a separate presentation, because if we'll dive into it, probably we'll run out of the time. So how my PDA can talk data, right? Because obviously you have this digital wallet, you have identity, you have all those data somewhere aggregated, right? But now you need to figure out, okay, how to let people ask me for those data, how I can use those data in the context of, for example, using services. And obviously we identify a few kind of aspects of that. Like identity request, this is a pure, let's say the simplest amount of the data which you need to be on board to a service, maybe to subscribe to a service, maybe to be part of some service. And normally you can think of it like a simple request, like I need your email, I need your address, I need to phone number, and some other basic stuff which basically are required to provide you a simple service. And those identity requests, they need to be sent to your digital wallet, to your PDA. So the PDA needs to understand who is asking, how he asking it, and you know, so that he can understand the data structure and so on. And obviously you have a much more richer request in the context of pure data requests. Let's say your doctor wants to have access to your Fitbit data, or maybe a measurement of your heartbeat, or any other medical devices produce data which they can be used by different entities to help you out. Or maybe machine learning. Basically, you can have a service which allows you to basically give away the data, or not give access to the data, And then they will provide you additional services on top of it and helping you out to make a decision about specific topic. And MSP, meaningful service providers. So this is what they are aggregating your data, figuring out what, how they can help you out, and then providing you meaningful services, for example, advising you about what stuff you should buy and which stuff you shouldn't buy in the context of your health. For example, if you have a problem of with a different disease or stuff like that. And obviously the whole data enrichment, because obviously when you think about the data itself, the raw data are not as much interesting as the data which are produced out of it. So post-processing stuff. So all the bioproducts which actually are generated out of the raw data, and we call them the enrichment data, which then they can be used against the different services. And obviously, since you speak the data, you need to have always a consent for the data to give access to specific data. So you need to have the whole consent management life cycle within it built in, so you can make sure that you are in control of that, what is happening with your data. And obviously data capture itself means that actually you start generating the data, because some of the data you already have, some of them you can gain access from existing systems, but some of the data you all the time generating. Your devices are generating that for you, or maybe you're filling out a form or giving away some generated data which are produced by, for example, a smartwatch or any other sensors which you have. And to address all those problems, we came up with this ODCA, overlay data capture architecture, which I will briefly mention about and show how this allows you to interact with the data vault. Anybody who's interested in reading up a little bit more about that, obviously you can reach me out at the end of the presentation. There will be contact details, but as well, I encourage you to visit our website, odca.online, where you can find a little bit more information. And obviously, as I mentioned, raw data is one thing, but how we make sure that the data which we are using have this valuable aspect of the data, because the data can be generated by anybody, right? And they are basically useless for AI or any other services if you can't verify the source of the data and that you don't know the context of the data. So what that means, if you have a data like raw data, and let's say it's an expiration date, right? If you do not have a context, you have no idea what for it is. If it's an expiration date for your driving license, or maybe expiration date of your carton of milk in the fridge, right? Without the context, the data are not as much valuable as they could be. And obviously another aspect is the trusted source of the data. It means that you know exactly from where the data comes from. So for example, if you are working with the medical data, you need to make sure that the data which you're aggregating are coming from the device which were certified as a medical device following a specific ISO standards and different regulation, that you can trust those data. Because obviously if the doctor will take the data, he could make a huge mistakes by believing in the data which are coming from not trusted sources, which were not collected according to the procedure and all the best practices. And this could end up really badly. So we need to make sure that we have that. And obviously the privacy data processing, so everything related to the consent stuff, that you can be sure that I received the data from someone, and I'm allowed to use those data in a specific context, and actually the user agreed that he wants to give away those data. For example, if you are a researcher on university and you are doing like a cancer research, you collect the medical data, you need to be sure that there is a consent for all those data coming from individuals, even though that you not necessarily need to interact directly with those individuals. So you need to be able to track it back to the source and make sure that everything from the legal perspective is okay. And obviously the secure way to exchange the data, so we do not expose it to any leaks or any problems in that sense. There are different techniques for that. One of the interesting part, which is done in with an Own Your Data project by Christoph Fabianek, Semantic Containers. If someone is interested in that, I really encourage you to check it out. So Speaking of the data and the digital wallets, we came across this data model, which we build up to basically explain to everyone how we envision data flows within decentralized data economy. And just briefly, we split it to three. So by the way, this model quite often we call it a Mickey Mouse model from obvious reasons. And basically we are trying to explain to people how different set of the data and different aspects or different steps of the data will be in the future within decentralized data economy. So obviously one of the most important is the private locker. So what do we mean by private locker? The private locker is like data vault which Schluss provides, right? By the way, I hope that you don't mind that I use your logo. An example of the private data storage that only you have access and only you control the data. So you are in a full of control of that, what is coming in and coming out of that place, right? So this is your habitat. This is your place with all your data, right? Then you have escrow locker. Escrow locker is within the MyData vision. It's something like a data broker. Someone who helps you out to understand what you can do with the data. He aggregates the data from different sources, enrich the data, and basically helping you out to interact with this vast amount of the services up there and get a meaningful value out of the data which you're aggregating. Because to be honest, each individual, they have no idea what they can do with data and how they can be useful for someone else. For example, if someone is doing like this example, the cancer research, right? If you are not aware of how your data can be used and how they can be merged together and used for social benefits, or maybe just for a specific service, you won't be able to actually get a value out of it that actually you're aggregating those data. And obviously there is whole decentralized global storage. So all the public information, all the data, which is, from examples like data for the weather forecast or statistical purposes or whatever. So every piece of the information which we are aggregating as a society and as a community to allow everybody else to build on top of it. So this is a simplified version. And here is a kind of the whole flow of the data which going through that. I won't dive into details here because probably it's, let's say, too complex for a start. It comes directly from the purpose, from the envision of using overlay data capture architecture, allowing you to basically have a unified data language. And shortly, basically you have a holder. So it's the subject who basically is related to the data. So like you, user, individual. Then you have an issuer, whoever is collecting data maybe for you, or maybe providing your services, or maybe basically just want to get access to the data, or basically, sorry, not access to data, but basically he's managing data for you. So any third-party organization within our existing systems, like I don't know, Fitbit or any other service provider which aggregates data for you, and then they give you away giving away access to those data, on their servers or within their infrastructure and so on. And obviously third parties, so everybody else who actually want to interact with you, providing your services, providing your meaningful services around the data, or basically doing research or doing anything with the data. And in all those aspects here, you have a bit of the technology behind distributed ledger, verifiable credential, DIDs, basically everything related with trust and being able to do it in a decentralized fashion. So to make that happen, there is one important component in our opinion, which is the overlay data capture architecture. And this is more or less how it looked like. This is basically a concept of this data structure, which allows you to decouple a base context and preserve that context within the schema base, where the most important information are kept, and everything else is stripped out into something which we call overlays. So basically overlays are additional kind of coloration on top of the data, giving you possibility to have, human readable labels for the attributes, defining formatting, what kind of format it is, additional information, maybe legal aspect of the data, why I'm collecting the data. Maybe source means that you're attaching a PDF document, or maybe some stream of data means that you have a device which generates, let's say, a stream of data about your health status and stuff like that. But those are not static data; they are a live stream. Masking stuff means that anytime if someone will access the data, you can basically say, okay, for these purposes, we are masking the data in a sense. If you have a birth of date, you have a day, a month, and a year. And for these purposes, they just need a year. So you're hiding everything else and masking the data in a way that actually data are not losing their format. They are still valuable for other parties, but they just get information about a specific aspect of the data as a whole. And obviously all those objects which we are building up, they are linked together, and then providing you this immutable objects which you can be sure that they will never change in a time, and you can refer to it, asking and basically requesting access to your data. And in addition of, obviously this is meta language which you can describe your data structures, means that we are not forcing anybody to use a specific ontology, specific semantics. We're just saying that those are the base rules which you use to describe your data structure, and then this is how you ask and request the data based on this data structure. And it's very powerful because it's super flexible. It makes schema, like if you know it from existing systems, the schema is very static, and we make it really dynamic, which it can adapt to the specific use cases. And you can compose of those schemas together based on the, include one schema in another one, building up a bigger schemas out of the smaller ones, preserving the context and the source of the information which going out, or where it was generated or captured. And all those overlays help you out to basically enrich this data structure in a way that actually people and machines can understand it much better. And there is one overlay which is super important and helping out the user to protect his data. It's something which we call sensitive overlay. So if you're familiar with the PII, so personal identifiable information, so anything, any attribute, any information which allows me to track you down to the individuals and learn a little bit more about you, all those information are very sensitive, like your, maybe where you live, who you are, what's national ID, and stuff like that. Those are very sensitive information. And obviously, it's up to the issuer of that schema here to decide what are the sensitive information in the schema-based object. But it could happen that, for example, if you have a gender, which is by default is not a sensitive information, but there are some places in the world where there's more than just two gender recognized, and then it's actually starting being a very sensitive information. So you as a user, you can decide on your own what are the sensitive information and what you want to protect yourself against, right? So you put that sensitive overlay on front of your agent, of your PDI, or of your data vault. So each time if someone will ask for this kind of information, you can automatically know about it and recognize that someone is asking about sensitive information. It's very similar to the concept of the ad blocker within your browser, that you basically decide what you want to see. You decide what the data structure will be giving out and how. And obviously, when you have a digital wallet on your personal device, you have a connection to this data vault. You have interfaces towards data vault where the data are stored, logged, and you have just interfaces, and you just need to know how to talk the data to that place. So in that example, as soon as we have a Schluss data vault up there, your agent is connecting to it and basically taking out the data, marking whatever is sensitive and filtering that out in case if it's required, and allows you to basically get that through. So just a few words about PIIs. I think this is very important in the context of storage of the data and capturing the data. So everyone is familiar with the General Data Protection Regulation. and the definition of the personal identifiable information from there. The problem with the GDPR is not very concrete. It means that it mentions about things like this, but it doesn't say anything specific about like, okay, but what is PII? How I can, as a developer or building a new product, how I know which PIIs are there or not. So through some discussions within the community, Paul Knowles from Dativa Innovation have created something which is called blinding identity taxonomy. Currently, this blinding identity taxonomy looks more or less like this. It's basically it's an outcome of all the discussion in different communities through the lawyers, developers, different communities like crypto space, data mining, and so on. We identified specific attributes which could be considered as a PII. This blinding identity taxonomy is hosted right now within a Kantara initiative. I really encourage you to check it out. And this helps you out to understand if you're dealing with the data, what stuff you should take into consideration, how to secure those stuff properly if they are PIIs. Because within the overlay data capture architecture, basically it allows you to automatically identify those information, identify those attributes, and for example, provide additional security level in the sense of encrypting the data. If you are basically going through that filter, if you realize that there is a PII, automatically encrypt it, even if someone will compromise the data vault or any other place that the information will be useless for him because it will encrypt it. So this is briefly how the schema base looked like in the context of the JSON LD representation. So there are some metadata and there is a list of the attributes. It's up to the issuer to define what is the naming here and what kind of attributes goes in. And obviously there is a list of the attributes which are PII, so he flags them automatically that those are personal identifiable information, and this is what you need to watch out. And obviously this, so basically as soon as you have that structure, this object is immutable, means that it's stored in more or less the fashion of the content-based network. You have a hash representing that content, and then you can use it to, for example, send a request to your data vault asking, please provide me a driving license schema. Please provide me a medical heartbeat data, which is stored from that and that device. So within that, you have a very useful information like issued by. It could be signed by authority. Let's say the government is issuing those information. And as well information about classification. Right now we are playing with the classification of the most important, maybe too far, just a second. I will mention about classification in a few slides. But basically, here is an example of the entry overlay as well, a little bit of information about default values which the user can choose. If you are capturing the data, then you have the label overlay, basically human readable names for the attributes. So when you're presenting the data to the user in his digital wallet, you have identity requests. With that schema, you see exactly what stuff the service is asking for, and you can basically agree on that or not. The concept behind is that it's machine readable, means that the systems can talk each other and understand each other. So it's very similar to the approach of having unified APIs, so RESTful APIs across different systems. It's just that you currently, if you have a RESTful API, it's really hard to understand like meaning and the context of the data directly from those APIs because they are kept by the service itself. And here is much more generic approach. And obviously those objects, they need to be interoperable. So depending on the industry sector and the place from where the data are coming from, you have a different classification methods for that. Currently, we are using something which is called GIGS code, which is used it's a global industry classification standard. It's used in the financial sector, globally on the stock exchange and stuff like that to identify a different organization and the industries. And through that, you can basically adapt the context of the data directly to the industry. For example, you know that those data coming from the healthcare, so you need to take care of them differently. Maybe automotive, real estate, materials, energy, whatever sector you'll want to use. And obviously there is, it doesn't matter what kind of classification system you will use here. Another one is the industry sector categorization called NEX. It's a much more, let's say, modern classification, which allows you to aggregate and classify the data in those all new emerging technologies like smart transportation, intelligent structure, clean power, and all the fancy sectors which are relatively new within the space. And the reason for that is that you have the context of the data. You can basically point it out, and obviously you could have a specific classification within the specific industry, specific trust governance framework, like let's say pharmaceutical companies within their consortium, they will have own classification for that. But basically, as soon as you pull the data or distribute the data, you know exactly from where it comes, and you can understand the context of the data. So now how that knowledge can be applied and how this actually could work. So how the PDA talks to the data vault. So
Sorry, Robert, just a quick note on the time. So we have until 1:15 only, and we'd like to have the chance to ask you some questions as well. So just a quick note.
Sure. Last slide, so I promise. So basically that's the most important part here, but obviously without understanding the previous stuff, it's hard to grasp it. But basically, as soon as you have the PDA, so digital wallet, mobile application, dashboard, whatever, you have identity requests which comes in, which have a unique identifier of the schema which you would like to retrieve the data for, let's say a driving license or medical data and so on. The system is able to resolve it, check if we have those data, then generate the consent for it, for that specific entity, and then granting access to the data. Means that whoever is requesting that, he won't get the data directly. We are talking here about accessing the data, whatever time they need for it. And then they can reach the data vault directly, pull the data out, use the data for whatever reasons they need, remove it, and whenever in the future they would like to have it once more, if the token is expired or the consent is not valid anymore, they need to request that once more. Means that you as a user, you have full control who and when accessing your data and which structures they are pulling out, and you can easily control that through the consent mechanism. So I hope that that was good enough to grasp the idea of the problems here. Obviously, it's a pretty complex system and environment. I will stop here. Here are my contact details, links to our organization and the ODCA, so you can look it up. And obviously, yeah, time for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. That was really, really fascinating. You've packed in a load of stuff in there, so I'm sure that there will be questions for you on some of the details on what you just talked us through. So before I ask my questions, I wonder if I should, I will open the floor to attendees of the webinar. If you have any questions for Robert on his talk, you can unmute and just ask away.
Yeah, or the problem was too complex to grasp, or it was too easy to understand everything. No questions.
It's an excellent presentation, for sure. So maybe sort of like I'm just kind of trying to grasp actually like the scope of everything that you're doing with this personal digital assistant. So you're obviously aware of the like you showed that one slide with all the different aspects that go into this, and are you sort of seriously building a system that can actually handle, or was it, yeah, this one, all of this?
Yes. Basically, it has to be built that way. I don't see any other way to doing it, because as I mentioned, digital wallet for the decentralized data economy is like the browser, right? Yeah. The user don't want to need, so the point here is that your identity and your data, they cannot be just split around. This is what it was mentioned by by Schluss that you want to centralize that. You want to have a control of that. If it's completely decentralized in the sense that, you know, I'll do a bit here, I'll do a bit here, then you're basically losing control, or even not losing the control, but you're confused. You don't know how to grasp it, right? So we need to have a mechanism which allows you to combine all that stuff together. The most important stuff related with identity, trust, data, everything in one place, right? And then as soon as you have that, it's easier for the user to understand decentralized data economy, because this is complex problem, complex ecosystem, which obviously won't work if the people will be scared of them, and if people will not be able to understand what is happening behind it, right? So we need to make sure that all the important parts are part of the one simple mechanism. And obviously, there will be plenty of PDA, personal digital assistant. There will be different flavors. They will be coming from the government sector. They will be coming from the private sector. The thing is that all those stuff together, it needs to be able to talk each other. So this is why within Hyperledger Aris, we are working on standardization processes, or let's say a common best practice how to do it properly, so everyone, no matter who is building what, is able to actually use the interaction across a different system. So yes, it is a complex system, and obviously we can't do it alone. Yeah. But I think that's required to have it. Same as the browser. The browser started very simple, right? Displaying a simple HTML page, and now you can do like payments, ordering, buying. You have a password manager, different authentication mechanisms, stuff like that. That's what we are up to basically pack this complex system behind a simple, understandable user interface.
Yeah, and I really like this this analogy to the internet browser, because that's also understandable in those terms that, you know, you can have multiple browsers on your laptop, on your computer, and they all function roughly the same way. You can access the same things through those. I wonder, I mean, you are obviously building this with a bunch of open source code and as much kind of openness as you can. Do you see a future where we will get a proprietary browser, quote unquote, built by, for example, Google, which will kind of dominate this landscape?
Obviously, that's something which we cannot avoid, right? This will happen, and it's already happening. There are some companies building digital wallets and personal digital assistants in the form of that it's not open source. Yeah. And that's not a problem. The biggest problem is that as soon as they will start building the backend behind this PDA in a way that actually kind of talk each other, right? So this is very important that we have this layer of the network, which provides a standardized protocols allowing to exchange verifiable credential, identify someone in the offline or online world, that you can exchange the data with it, and so on. Obviously, the value which goes in this, let's say, closed systems is something which is related with the user experience, convenience, maybe some additional trust. Maybe it will be created by a bank and they will build the solution for their customers. But obviously, they need to build on top of the open standards. Otherwise, we again will end up in those silos that will, you know, lock you up in a specific environment. And this is what we are trying to do right now, and trying to encourage all the communities to get together and talk about how we can build the base, which on top of it we can do the proprietary stuff and different businesses on top, because that's the crucial part here.
All right, thank you. I know that we are a little bit over our time now, but I still want to open the floor. If anyone has questions, either for Schluss, Marie-José, or Robert, either together or separately. So if there's something that you didn't quite, that you want a little bit clarification for, or their opinions on a topical matter that's on your mind that you've been thinking about, please go ahead and ask away.
I do have a question for you, Robert, since we're talking about business models, etc. as well. What do you foresee where money can be made and where it shouldn't be. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so basically for me, there is a kind of ethical problem with that as well. So first of all, I will start with this example of which I'm always like one extreme side, right? Because as soon as someone has access to the data, to your data, he can do a lot of stuff. Like we said, that if the companies are having a lot of data about you, they basically controls you. And decentralized data doesn't mean that we are changing that paradigm at all, because it's just about that I need to ask you personally to give me all your data. And then if you like buy it, sell it, stuff like that, then you're ending up in the position that, you know, the company can come and buy all your data and then basically control your whole life, right? So I'm kind of doing this analogy to, we should not be able to sell your data, the same reason why we are not able to sell your own human organs, because some people are in a position to, yes, they will say no, but some people are whatever, right? And they will get the money, right? So
True.
this is a very tricky problem. And obviously we need to find a different monetization models to, because if we like it or not, the data is the value, right? The data itself is a new form of currency, right? It's a fuel which basically let us, the whole economy, move on. So how to solve it from technical point of view and how to build business model on top of that, that's a complex problem, because there are some different ways of doing it and so on. But I think that the most important thing here is that the data itself is the value. So there is no need to put anything on top of it in addition that someone is buying data or not. It's just that as soon as you move the assets, you move the value, right?
Yeah, but for that reason, isn't it, especially for that reason, important that the data is at your premises and at your control? And of course, I fully agree with you that we need to stay far away from people exploiting their own personal data. And that's what I think is of concern to us, because having the control over your personal data gives you also the responsibility. And are people aware and able to take that responsibility? So that's another point I think that needs to be discussed, and a lot of work has to be done on that as well. But yeah.
Exactly. And to add to it, I mean, first of all, not everyone want to have this responsibility, because most people, this is why we are using banks and not keeping money in the socks, right? We want to get rid of the responsibility and have this convenient way to actually operate within our systems, right? So that's a big problem. The second thing is that this is something which we're exploring right now. It's something which we call purpose-based services. So basically that whatever your data flows, there has to be a purpose why someone needs the data, right? So let's say if the company asks you for data, you know exactly what purpose is behind it. It means that they want to sell you something, or they want to use it for advertisement, or maybe just because you are using their transportation, like you're taking a flight and there is a regulation saying that you need to give the data because in case of the plane crash or something, that we know exactly who was there, right? So if you know exactly the purpose for what the data are provided, then you can be much more safer in the sense that they won't take it and use it against you, right? So you can have this trust. And if the technology and the system will allow for that, that the people will be much more comfortable using their data in the proper ways, and not like right now that you have this small tick box and do you agree? And actually you have no idea what did you agree on, right? And then in most cases, people are just lost because they are not in a position of deciding about what they can do and what not, right? So I think this purpose is very, very important in the future to make sure that we know exactly why we are doing it. And then you can have the safety net, because as we said about the consent, right? Right now, a lot of companies and a lot of actually projects which I saw is that they are making sure that you consent to everything and you understand everything. But if you think about like amount of the consent which you need to give away, just purely Facebook, if you will need to consent to every third-party companies, it's over 3,000 companies. Do you really want to review each of them and basically decide about it? I don't think so. And this is why this purpose-based consent makes sense, because you say once that, yes, take my data for, let's say, transportation purposes. That's it. Don't ask me anymore. And then automatically everything is happening. So it's much more user-friendly. because we don't want to spend and analyze all those privacy terms and conditions stuff, because it's not what we have time for.
Yeah, you will need
Sure,
assistance to help you with this in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. And what we also think, we're talking about giving consent based on for certain purposes, etc. The system needs to work for you. So once, if you made a mistake or you regret to having disclosed information for whatever reason, that you're able to disclose it again and to stop having these parties having your.
I agree. I agree that sort of changing your mind later on for any reason is absolutely crucial for this. It can't be just a one-way street. No. But hey, we've gone over our time, so I want to thank you so much, Marie-José and Robert. It's been absolutely delightful hearing about what's happening at Schluss, what's happening with Minerva. And thank you everyone who joined us. And I encourage you to join the MyData Global Slack workspace. It's at mydata.org/Slack. And I look forward to continuing these discussions there on this really fascinating topic. So thank you again and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.